You feel like you don't matter, feel like your life doesn't matter, get involved.
I am aware of mothers who have taken their own lives, having lost the will to live, and having lost their tamariki to state care, and have felt powerless and failed in all attempts to get them back. I also note the analysis by Len Cook of the increased trending of tamariki Māori into SIFs, 89% who either entered a community-based or prison sentence by the time they were 20 years of age, which is supported by the discussions I have had with Māori men in the prison. Additionally, it is sad and horrific reality that children who enter state care are additionally abused and are more likely as adults to suffer mental health and anxiety disorders, suicide tendencies, and to engage in unhealthy addictions, including sexual relationships and drug and alcohol misuse, and have their children consequently targeted by the state. The Tribunal is seeking further clarification, what additional changes to Crown legislation and policy or practice that is required in order to secure outcomes consistent with Te Riti and its principles. And I won't read all those because those are what you want to do. My recommendations are that Te Riti o Waitangi was not drafted as a constitutional statute, and therefore Te Riti o Waitangi, its principles and obligations to Māori have not been written or upheld within every government department, policy or document. Te Riti o Waitangi, its principle and obligations to Māori within government documents are subject to independent bias, dependent on individual interpretation, will and/or understanding, and rely on good faith toward Māori in order for Māori to receive equitable outcomes. The New Zealand Government ensures its health, education, social law and justice service needs to New Zealand residents and to Māori are facilitated through Crown entities responsible to government through an appointed minister. These organisations include hospital, district health boards, police, Oranga Tamariki, courts, etc., and are part of New Zealand's state sector groups under the Crown Entities Act 2004. They are not legislated to include Te Riti o Waitangi principles and obligations within their government structures. My first recommendation to respond to the question, what additional changes to Crown legislation, policy or practice is required in order to secure outcome consistent with Te Riti and its principles, is that I request and recommend changes to Crown legislation, policy and practice so that the principles and obligations of Te Riti o Waitangi be drafted as a constitution of Aotearoa. This will require and ensure that all Crown entities will essentially uphold Te Riti-based frameworks within their governance, policy and practices throughout their whole entity and not potentially rely on individual nicety, but view their roles and responsibilities to Māori as a matter of civic duty. Te Riti o Waitangi, drafted as a constitution of Aotearoa, New Zealand, will ensure whānau Māori, hapu and iwi Māori receive equitable and consistent outcomes as defined within the principles and obligations of Te Riti. Tamariki Māori are an Indigenous factor in New Zealand, shrouded in secrecy, unrecognised and unaccounted for. Their very existence is blurred between government agencies, health and education, Crown entities that do not maintain transparency or accountability, alongside blurred notions of iwi boundaries. At their birth, their ethnicity is often determined by hospital administrative staff who are more often than not white, middle-aged women who categorise these tamariki based on racial profiling as specified by Reid. Throughout their mother's pregnancy and for the first 6 weeks of their lives, they are dependent on maternity system and a midwifery workforce that is based on Eurocentric policy and assimilation practices, and where the majority of the workforce are white middle-aged women. Institutional racism is well documented and proven as a negative maternal health determinant for hapu mama and pipi Māori. Since the advent of the Social Security legislation 1938, primary medical services have been provided on a fee-for-service basis, paid for by the patient, assisted by a universal system of government subsidies. At 6 weeks, tamariki Māori are transferred into a primary healthcare system. All indications are that 68% of tamariki Māori and 24% of Pākehā children are unable to afford or to access health care within the system on a daily basis. Poverty is a major factor in determining the needs of tamariki Māori, but it is not accounted for as risk by Oranga Tamariki. In 2011 and again in 2016, the UN Committee observed that the rights of children in New Zealand are not clearly articulated in laws and policies, and highlighted an opportunity to include children's rights in the context of Te Reo Waitangi and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. I recommend again Te Reo Waitangi be drafted as a constitution to address these opportunities. How does the Crown redress the harm it's caused? It cannot be ignored that tamariki Māori entering state care are missing and unaccounted for by its predecessor, Child, Youth and Family, and by Oranga Tamariki themselves. The opening address at the Waitangi Tribunal hearing by the Crown into this case, Y2915, argued that this case should be dismissed because of the number of tamariki Māori taken into state care was ambiguous, as there was no certainty about how many they were talking about, and/or the state could not establish the full number of children individually who entered state care, and as such, the encounters for all tamariki who enter care is unknown. Len Cook's evidence presented to the Waitangi Tribunal states that from his analysis in February 2020, the core statistics of tamariki order could not meet the basic requirements of Tier 1 statistics and do not meet the requirements of the 6 critical dimensions set in 2007 set by government statisticians. Russell Wills, as the Child Health Commissioner in his State Report 2015 states, there is little reliable or easily accessible data available about the outcomes of children in the care system. In our view, SIF and MSD systems are not set up to measure and record the information that matters. It is clear to me that the lives and outcomes for tamariki Māori forcibly removed from their parents and their whānau matters. Will's 2015 report further states he could not tell when, where or why 1,000 children had left care. My personal experience and my conversations with whānau Māori, parents and mothers, commented on my Facebook page, Not One More Baby to Be Taken, suggests an ongoing battle with Oranga Tamariki and its providers for parents and whānau to maintain or to see their tamariki whom are in state care. On a regular basis, the cost of travel impacts severely when children and whānau are separated by long distances, for example, at other ends of New Zealand, or when permission is given to allow caregivers to leave the country with their tamariki and who now live overseas. Mothers and whānau Māori also convey to me the experiences of being tricked and signing permanent placement orders and home for life orders by social workers, believing they can, as a parent, continue to see their children, only to learn later that their children have been adopted or missing and their whereabouts unknown. This is a crime against humanity for a mother or parent to have their child taken forcibly by the state and to not be allowed to see them and to not know where they are or to not know whether they are safe or not. Under the current Adoption Act 1955, number 93, section 8, cases where consent may be dispensed with, the court may dispense with the consent of a parent or guardian to the adoption of the child in any one of the following circumstances. If the court is satisfied that the parent or guardian has abandoned, neglected, or persistently... Yes?
Sorry, again to interrupt, but that part you can probably take as read.
Okay.
Those legal requirements.
All right. So basically what I'm saying is that children can be taken, and with a report from a social worker, that child can be adopted without the parent's knowledge or consent. They don't have to appear in court. We've talked about the current Adoption Act. It continues to be criticised by ageing women and children. A review of the Act is necessary in order for parents to find children and for children to find parents. I also raised the issue of parents who are deemed to be safe to care for their newborn, but who are not given the ability to be reunited with previous children. I recommend a state commission of inquiry to identify and find every missing child taken into state care since 2015 until 2030. I believe that these children should be maintained contact with until 17 years of age. Even if a child is permanently placed into a home for life, adopted or permanently placed, I believe that individual child should remain on the books of somebody. Mothers, parents and whānau should be supported by the state financially to find their child or children who are missing, and a special committee as part of this review be set up to investigate this phenomena. They should record the outcomes of those children who are lost or missing and unable to be found. The traumatic impact of removal at birth has far-reaching impacts on mothers and babies. The Ombudsman's report reveals both an intensity of loss and grief. Notwithstanding their breach of rights, these mothers and their babies were not and have not been given adequate support for follow-up counselling or offered an opportunity for remedial support or compensation after such a traumatic event. It is my recommendation that an independent inquiry would not only identify all the children within the timeframe 2015 to 2020, but would also identify the mothers, and I believe that they need compensation. I say in the form of $50,000 per mother, in order for her to get her life back together, and each mother should also be acknowledged and registered by ACC to remedy all their personal counselling requirements for the future of their lifetime. How can the Crown agencies be arranged so as to achieve more equitable outcomes? Well, it's important to realise that they've failed 14 independent reviews. They are the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. The government would do better to spend more time and efforts to prevent children falling off the cliff. Maslow's hierarchical needs identified in 1943 a theory of human motivation which comprised 5 models of human need: physiological, safety, love and belonging, esteem, confidence, respect, and a desire to belong and fulfil one's full potential. Māori are less likely to achieve any one of these human aspirations. In New Zealand society today, 68% of Māori fail to have an adequate home to live in or adequate food. Shall I just keep, I'm not sure which part you want me to not read. Okay,
Well,
okay.
no, I certainly don't want to suggest that we're
Okay.
telling you not to read.
Okay.
But we have read
you
the
have.
brief in advance.
right,
So
yeah.
this is an opportunity for you to highlight
Okay.
matters that you want to particularly
Yeah.
emphasise. Otherwise,
All
we're
right.
happy to go to questions when you're
Okay.
ready.
Can I just say that it's important to understand that Māori, there have been positive Māori outcomes. The Pio Te report in 1988 highlighted the challenges of institutional racism and personal racism. And for most, the recommendations from that report would go a long way to fix a lot of the problems we have today, but they've continued largely to be ignored. Can I just say, I don't know what else to do. I'm quite happy to go to questions.
Ka pai.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Ms Narimu will start
Thank
our
you.
questions.
Yep.